Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 27th of June, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information by calling the Alaska Weather Information Line, 1-800-472-0391. Stay up to date with local information around your part of Alaska by heading to our website, weather.gov/Alaska, or on your mobile device, mobile.weather.gov. Or if you can't find what you're looking for, feel free to email me, david.snider@noaa.gov is an easy way to find me. Let's take a look at some of the hazardous weather we have going on around our region. We're going to start in southeast tonight. First with the red shaded areas. Those are red flag warnings that'll continue until 10 o'clock tonight. A red flag warning is an indication to wildfire managers that conditions are ripe for wildfire to break out if a fire were to start. What we have is dry conditions coming off of the mountains. Air is flowing over the mountains. The heat is coming up. The humidity is going down. And it's a perfect recipe for a wildfire to start and spread. So not the kind of situation we'd like to see in the region. So the red flag warning is raised saying, hey, watch out, fire danger has gone up significantly today. The orange area around the Taya River is for the warmth that is melting the glacier upstream and bringing the possibility of flooding to the Taya River, especially along the Chilkoot Trail. So keep that in mind if you've got plans to do some hiking this weekend. It's a beautiful, warm weekend ahead and probably near or record-setting temperatures in the region. But what that means is for glacial-fed streams, those levels are going to be coming up quick, a little bit more each day. So keep that in mind and plan accordingly and be safe no matter where you're going there, especially if you're heading up toward the Haines area. Now, as we look out to the west, of course, what we're dealing with across the Kenai Peninsula is smoke. A dense smoke advisory has been posted for the area. Most of that, again, coming from the Swan Lake fires there. We expect to see the smoke settle down in the morning hours into the valleys and then have trouble mixing out in the afternoon simply because of the high heat that we expect each and every day. Across the Skwentna River, around Skwentna, the Yentna, is coming up because of the glacial-fed streams we were just talking about there. The high heat, they're melting things back a little bit, and pretty typical situation in the summertime. And again, we're seeing it this summer with high heat in the region bringing those river levels up. So be mindful of that as you're out and about. Good luck fishing, good luck traveling, and because of all the changes coming around in southern Alaska and southeast, make sure you're checking in with Alaska 511. It's a good way to monitor traffic and road conditions around Alaska from the state of Alaska, and that's especially important if you're planning to do any traveling north, south, east, or west around the Kenai Peninsula over this weekend. Let's take a look at fire danger now. This is growing. You'll notice a change, though, across northwestern Alaska, where we had the fire danger up a little bit yesterday. Recent rains across the western Brooks Range and the coastal plain have really cut back hard on that, which is good news. But we can see that areas around the Yukon Flats have certainly grown. The upper Yukon Valley has moved into a little bit more broad extreme level there. And a lot of areas along the Yukon Valley itself are at least in high levels of fire danger. And that is also true across parts of the Susitna Valley, into the Copper River Valley, and up into the upper Tanana Valley. We have still a pocket of extreme fire danger around western parts of the Kenai, and hit and miss as you head northward along the Glen Highway and also into southwestern Alaska. So as always, be mindful with what you're doing when you're using fire as a tool or as a recreational warming device if you need that, but just be careful and make sure you check in with your local fire managers before setting anything afire. Certainly if you're out there burning trash, make sure it's a good day to do that before you get things going. Here's a look at the visible satellite picture now. And one thing to notice is this huge swath of relatively dry air across the southern third of Alaska and certainly into southwestern Alaska. Low pressure is seen swirling here south of Unalaska and Sand Point. That's pushing in a broad area of southerly winds right up the west coast and just starting to chip away at a lot of that dry air across western Alaska now. But it is that intense sunshine that in some cases is about 20 hours long is really warming things up, and that is making it very hard for clouds to bubble up in the heat of the day. Despite it being the heat of the day, this is making it very difficult for that upward moving air to actually begin. Across southeast, a very dry pattern here. Air is coming over the higher terrain, the boundary range that is drying things out, setting the stage for that increasing wildfire danger here, and pushing that marine stratus slowly out to sea. Gusty winds will continue around Cross Sound as a result of that, but by and large, it's going to be a very warm day for most in southeast, south central, southwest, and really most of the interior there. In some cases, for the southern half of Alaska, we're talking about temperatures that are approaching record levels, maybe even above record levels. Here's a look at the satellite picture one more time. There's that swirl of low pressure we were talking about. On the back side of this, widespread areas of marine stratus, so low visibility in some cases, and certainly a little bit of rain, but nothing terribly significant or something that you haven't seen yet. Rainfall was spreading its way up the west coast into the Bering Strait, and we still have some areas of light rain here across the western Brooks Range and the central parts of the mountain range, with generally lower clouds and some rainfall across the Chukchi coast. Some of that was spreading eastward into the northern parts of the Yukon this afternoon. In the meantime, we're watching for the dry weather to continue. It looks like this is going to be a trend that takes us well into the weekend and maybe into next week. There is some hope for a disturbance to move in from the west, and if that kind of cuts into this ridge of high pressure that's been clearing up all the clouds, the heat may back off just a little bit, but then have the ability to build back in from the west and south across the North Pacific and back into Alaska as we head into the next part, especially the latter part of next week. So just because we get a short break doesn't mean it's entirely gone by the end of next week. The heat may still be with us. Here's a look at the weather map now. High pressure sitting at across Norton Sound, 1,020 millibars there, and the squiggly lines on the smokestack, that does indeed mean smoke across the Kenai Peninsula, the Middle Tanana Valley, up across the Yukon Flats. This has been fairly poor air quality for parts of the Middle Tanana Valley earlier today. As the day has gone on and the air is mixed up a little bit, those levels have certainly improved. You can check in on the latest air quality index for your neighborhood and your part of Alaska by looking at the State of Alaska's Division of Air Quality page there. Just type in AQI and DEC. You should be able to find that pretty easily. And across southeast, there's been some areas of fog right across the outer coast. Low pressure sitting across northwestern parts of the lower 48. That trough of low pressure has been dragging in the air off the higher terrain and into southeast, helping to keep things dry and very, very warm. Low pressure also sitting very close to the Sand Point region, 1,006 millibars there, a little bit of a front. The leading edge of that cooler air, and really not much to write home about, but it is enough to bring in some light rainfall and some drizzle out across the Alaska Peninsula. That's been ongoing for several days now, and that surge of southerly wind making it up into the Bering Strait, also helping to keep things pretty mild across coastal areas of the west coast. Sea surface temperatures are very warm. Out across the west, areas of pockets and drizzle and light rainfall across Shemya. That's spreading north and east tonight. High pressure is entrenched, going nowhere across south central and southwestern Alaska. You can see some of the clouds starting to fill in a little bit more across southwest and Bristol Bay. Trough of low pressure across southeast, again, really going nowhere. It looks like it'll help to keep things fairly dry and mild for many of you as we head into the overnight hours. And our trough across the north, focusing light rain showers there across the Chukchi coast into the central and eastern Brooks Range. Smoke will be fairly widespread again across the Yukon Flats, into the Tanana Valley, and westward into the upper Kuskokwim and the Koyukuk, and across south central and the Kenai Peninsula, some of that making its way into places like Seward and Prince William Sound, and maybe even down the highway toward Homer. High pressure is sitting across the southern Gulf. That's at 1,029 millibars. That's enough to push a little bit of light rain into parts of Kodiak as we head into tonight. By tomorrow, it looks like a lot of that will be falling apart. A trough of low pressure still sitting very close to Bristol Bay. We'll keep most of the rain showers and drizzle across the chain and across the southern end of the Alaska Peninsula. With plenty of sunshine still in place at 1,019 millibars there, the high pressure system will still be in control. We expect to see a little bit of a drift of those showers and maybe even a thunderstorm making its way across the southern end of the boundary range. Just like in the last couple days, we would expect to see the very southern end of the inside passage there with lightning risk as we have tonight. Showers will continue across the Brooks Range there, especially across the coastal plain, the central western Beaufort Sea coast into the Chukchi coast. And you'll notice our wave of low pressure out in the west really hasn't made a whole lot of forward advance, but as we get into Saturday, you can see that breaking down a little bit. You can see that starting to move its way into the western coast, a sign that maybe this ridge of high heat is starting to lose a little bit of its intensity. If that's the case, then we may see this slide through as we get into Sunday and early Monday. The heat would back off just a little bit, but then the ridge of high pressure here looks like it's going to start to build back in as we head into next week. And that's only if this wave can actually make through. If it doesn't matter. It's going to stay warm and dry for most areas as we head well into your holiday week. For southeast, looks like dry conditions for your Saturday. Then again, watching for higher than normal levels in places like the Taya River. Same goes for Squentna. Areas of light rain across the north, and we'll watch for some very spotty shower and thunderstorm activity, mainly across higher terrain as we get into your Saturday and once again on Sunday, with temperatures running at or even above record levels in some cases. Here's a look at the temps now. Low to mid 50s for many, 60 or 50 I should say around Ketchikan, Craig, Klawock, mid to upper 50s for you, 55 in Sitka. Looking at temps in the mid to upper 50s around the Cook Inlet region, upper 50s for the middle Tanana Valley as well. Closer to 60 around McGrath, down toward Galena, up toward Ruby. Looks like temps in the 30s and 40s for the Beaufort Seacoast, 46 around Shishmaref, and about 55 in Nome, 44 in St. Paul. A high of 51 there tomorrow, 53 in Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, South Central, with temperatures in the mid to upper 70s around Cook Inlet, mid 80s perhaps around Palmer and Wasilla, and upper 80s around Talkeetna, mid to upper 80s around parts of the Fairbanks region as well, upper 70s and lower 80s for Southeast and 40s for the North Slope. Places like Point Hope, Point Lake could be pushing the 50 to 60 degree mark. Nome at 66, Unalakleet about the same there in the mid-60s. 60 overnight in Fairbanks on Saturday morning, 30s and 40s for the North Slope, but well above freezing, close to 50 in Nome, Shishmaref 45, Kodiak 54, mid-50s for Southeast, South Central, in the mid to upper 50s overnight. Very, very mild. 40s for the Alaska Peninsula and lower 40s for Adak and Atka, with high temperatures in the interior on Saturday in the mid to upper 80s again, pushing 90 in Talkeetna, 80 for Homer. South Central looking at temperatures that are again pushing the record highs, and upper 60s to upper 70s for Southeast, St. Paul at 51. A quick check of where we're going the next 8 to 14 days. Well above normal signals here in the climate outlook for southern third of the U.S., southern third of Alaska, including Southeast. Not quite so warm across the north, and very dry conditions except for northern areas.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And time for your aviation update now. IFR conditions will be fairly widespread across the North Slope and into some of your favorite passes like Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass by Friday morning. Most of the interior will be VFR. However, there is a considerable amount of smoke at lower levels there, so you are going to run into poor visibility, and you'll see that in your TAFs. Probably in some places it could be as low as a mile. So dense smoke will be in the forecast, and there will be some advisories for that likely across the interior and south central tomorrow. For Southeast, VFR conditions are expected to start your day. IFR is widespread across the Gulf and into the Alaska Peninsula and around the southern end of Kodiak Island, and across the western Bering into the central and western chain, with VFR conditions expected across the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, and Kotzebue Sound. By the afternoon, you'll see some improvement in the ceilings and visibility across the North Slope. Look for marginal conditions to kind of peel back there across some parts of the coastal plain. South of that, again, we'll still be dealing with smoke. Watch for shower and thunderstorm activity to develop across some parts of the western Alaska range. That should be minimal, as high pressure is firmly in charge, but there could be an isolated tower or two out there. And the same goes for areas coming in off the higher terrain over southern parts of Southeast, specifically Hyder. That would be the main concern there. IFR conditions there around the Gulf and south of AKwx all the way down toward Sand Point. Watch for hit and miss IFR from the Bering Strait down through, let's say, Etolan Strait and just about to the Alaska Peninsula, and the western Bering looks to be all IFR. Saturday morning, VFR is fairly widespread. Marginal conditions up and down the Chukchi Coast into parts of Southwest. You'll see generally VFR conditions for Southeast. Smoke will still be an issue, especially in the morning hours for the interior and South Central. Out in the west, IFR will reign supreme. You'll see some breaks in that as we get into the afternoon. Marginal conditions from Kiska and west. For the Southwest Capes, watch for areas of marginal weather there, and for the Alaska Peninsula into Kodiak Island. And maybe a slightly better chance for convection there, as one little disturbance is trying to work its way through this intense ridge of high pressure. However, convection should be generally minimal at this point, and we will be watching for that by the afternoon. Look for VFR conditions across a large part of Southeast. Here's your pass conditions, and we expect to see Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass go from IFR to VFR during the daytime tomorrow. It does look like we'll see some improvement, but that doesn't mean that everything's going to be A-OK. On the north side, though, there could still be marginal conditions there through the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, Rainy Pass, onto Windy Pass, and Isabel Pass should all be VFR. As you get out toward Mentasta Pass, not expecting a whole lot of change, but you're going to start running into a lot more smoke as you get into some of the Tanana Valley areas and into the Yukon Valley for sure. Tanita Pass, we're expecting to see VFR there. Again, watch for low-level smoke. Chance for convection in the afternoon. Portage Pass also looking for smoke in the area there. So VFR with caution, and Chilkoot and White Pass looking for VFR conditions for your Friday. High pressure is firmly in charge, and by tomorrow you can see that the heat ring right here across South Central, Southwest, and into the western interior is at or above 12,000 feet for freezing levels there. This is a lot of warm air, and the ridge of high pressure is firmly entrenched over parts of Alaska into southeast, where levels there are running around 10,000 feet, out to the west about 8 to 10,000 feet in the western Bering. Icing potential, probably don't need to talk about this too much right now considering the heat. Levels are at or above 10,000 feet, maybe even 12,000 feet across the central and eastern chain, isolated moderate at worst. And again, we're watching for a very small risk for isolated convection across the western terrain there of the Alaska Range. Most of that will probably never develop thanks to the intense amount of heat upon the atmosphere right now. High pressure sitting right over us tomorrow. The jet stream has a trough of low pressure across eastern parts of Asia. That's running a strong southwesterly jet right up through the Bering Strait. And then the ridge goes up and over Alaska and descends over parts of southeast with an offshore flow that's fairly strong, keeping you warm and dry and generally clear. A trough across the western U.S. exists as well, and that's helping to keep our high pressure system right in place. At 9,000 feet, you can see that high pressure ridge sitting right over south central in the western Alaska Range. In fact, right over Denali, it looks like. Northerlies coming off of southeast, a west and northwesterly flow over the eastern interior, and a broad southwesterly flow over the Bering with low pressure just east of Kamchatka. And then you can see that shifts just a little bit at 3,000 feet. Our ridge of high pressure still in place. Southerlies coming up through the Chukchi, about 30 to 40 knots. Westerlies over the north slope and light northerlies across southeast and very light winds across south central. So for turbulence, that makes us look at the western end of the Kobuk and Noatak region, as well as the western Brooks Range, the western Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, and the western chain, as well as a hit and miss across some of the higher terrain for the Alaska Peninsula, generally below 4,000 feet. Isolated chop will be found across the north and west.
The sky on the 4th of July.
Hey there, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dehne Regis, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. We're here to help you find your way around the sky. It's almost the 4th of July, and we're ready to celebrate the red, white, and blue.
That's right, Dean. I'm ready to get outside on a warm night, kick back in a lawn chair, and watch some fireworks.
But after the fireworks, why not stay out a little later and watch the stars? And we can check out a red star, a white one, and a blue one.
Plus, you may catch a glimpse of a slender crescent moon along with 2 giant planets.
It should be a star-studded night. Let's head to the sky. Okay, we have our sky set to July 4th at 11 p.m. I know it gets dark really late in the heart of summer, but it has to be dark to see fireworks, right?
Cue the fireworks.
Ooh, ah. Well, wait a second. Something's missing.
Yeah, where's the moon?
Shoot, I forgot the moon. Let's rewind. Let's go back to 10 p.m. before the fireworks. Ah, there it is, a super slim waxing crescent moon just above the horizon.
You'll have to be timely to see it before it sets around 10:30 p.m. Let's see what the moon looks like when it's a lot fuller.
Look at all those craters. The moon has been bombarded by meteoroids ever since it was formed, and they left huge holes on the lunar surface.
The largest impacts created the darker areas on the moon, what we call the seas. The meteoroids hit the moon so hard that they cracked the surface. Lava erupted to the surface and cooled into the flat, dark areas. They're not really seas of water, but they made intriguing places to explore.
Take the Sea of Tranquility over there. That is where Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon in 1969. When I look at the moon, I often think, wow, we actually went there. And I can imagine bounding across the lunar surface. Okay, we're back on Earth at 11 p.m. on July 4th. After the fireworks, look for 2 planets. Face south and you'll see giant Jupiter looking like a suspiciously bright cream-colored star.
And the ring planet Saturn is in the southeast. It doesn't stand out as much as Jupiter, but it glows with a steady yellow light.
Now that we're in a patriotic mood, let's look at a red star, a white star, and a blue star on the 4th of July. A red star is to the right of Jupiter. Its name is Antares, and it should twinkle like crazy.
Antares is the brightest star in the constellation Scorpius the Scorpion. And at this time of night, you may be able to make out the scorpion's body and tail above the horizon.
Hey, that actually looks like a scorpion.
I know, right? To see a wonderful white star, Turn to the east and look high in the sky for a big, bright triangle of 3 stars. That is the summer triangle. The faintest of these 3 stars is white in color and named Dehne, and it has quite a story.
That's right, James. Dehne marks the tail of Cygnus the Swan and is perhaps the farthest star you could see with the naked eye. It could be over 3,000 light years from Earth. That's about 17 quadrillion miles.
And our blue star for the 4th of July is nearby. It's the top star in the triangle and brightest of the 3. That is Vega, the brightest star in the constellation Lyre the Harp. Its blue color makes a nice contrast to red Antares.
You can see the moon, 2 planets, and red, white, and blue stars all week, not just on the 4th of July.
Since the moon is waxing, look for it after dark the week after the 4th of July.
And after the fireworks on the 4th, find Jupiter in the south, Saturn in the southeast,
Red Antares in the south and to the right of Jupiter,
and white Deneb and blue Vega in the summer triangle in the east.
What a great way to celebrate the 4th of July. It's all there when you keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with a look at your sea ice now. Marginal ice really hasn't changed a whole lot across the Beaufort Sea or the Chukchi coast. We'll still see some of that ice hung up on the shoals in the Chukchi as usual. We've had a little bit of an easterly flow moving across the Beaufort, but in time it looks like the winds are going to become a little more westerly as we get through the weekend and into early parts of next week. A lot of heat is moving northward as well. Sea surface temperature plots in a lot of locations are not reflecting quite the level of heat that we're seeing very close to the coast there. So if you're looking at charts and going, I think it's a lot warmer than that, you're probably right. For the very latest sea ice information, you can check the latest analysis and forecast anytime, weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. This map was updated on the 27th of June today. Here's a look at southeast, and you'll notice light southerly winds on the inside passage. That trend should continue. We're going to see a lot of heat across the Lynn Canal. Light winds, 2-foot seas there. Also looking at about 3-foot seas for the Clarence Strait. One thing to keep in mind is that clouds are building out across the Yukon and the British Columbia and moving over the Boundary Range. And as that happens, we might see an isolated shower or a thunderstorm. If that happens, it's going to be very close to the mountains and maybe drift into the inside passage, the worst case. So keep that in mind, even though conditions are very hot and most areas are pretty dry and sunny. West and northwesterlies coming down the outer coast will run about 10 to 15 knots, looking for 5-foot seas on Friday. Saturday, a little bit more of an onshore push there, about 10 to 15 knots tops. 4 to 5-foot seas expected with light winds on the inside. A southerly flow up the Lynn Canal could reach up to 15 knots with a 3-foot sea on Saturday. Across South Central, in Cook Inlet and Prince William Sound, 10 to 15 knots. Looks like small seas will be the rule. 4 to 5-foot seas across the Barrens. Westerlies coming across the northern parts of the Gulf, looking at about 10 to 20 knots with 4 to 5-foot seas there. On Saturday, light winds 10 to 15 knots through Cook Inlet. Not a big change there, 10 to 20 knots coming down the north and western Gulf. 2 to 5-foot seas expected for your Saturday there. For the Alaska Peninsula and the Bristol Bay region, light winds inside of the bay, 3-foot seas, 5-foot seas down the coast, a little bit more of a westerly flow coming into a weak area of low pressure here, looking at about 10 to 20 knots across the North Pacific, 6 to 8-foot seas, 6-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait at 25 knots with southwesterlies coming into Raspberry Island and southwesterlies on the eastern side of Kodiak Island, 20 knots and 6-foot seas there. That comes down just a little bit on Saturday, still looking at 5-foot seas on either side of Kodiak Island, westerlies coming down the Alaska Peninsula, 15 to 20, and 4-foot seas down the Alaska Peninsula's coastline on the Bering Sea side for your Saturday afternoon. Across the western chain, a southerly flow will be going strong, about as strong as anywhere else in Alaska right now anyway. That frontal boundary working its way eastward will drive up seas to about 15 to 20 feet at their highest point, but closer to the coastlines, you're looking at about 11 feet with a 25 to 30 knot wind from the south. For the central and eastern chain, a west and southwesterly flow coming up and over a ridge that's still going strong just to the south. I'll look for about 7 to 8-foot seas on the Pacific coast side, 5 to 7-foot seas on the Bering Sea side, and in general, again, about 15 to 25 knot winds. For Saturday, winds diminish out to the west. You can see we're still pushing those higher velocity winds from Kiska to Adak. South and southwesterly flow there around 25 knots, 15 to 20 knots across Unalaska to Nikolsky and Adak. Expect to see about 5 to 8 foot seas there, 5 to 7 foot seas on the Bering Sea coast side, and those higher seas are being pushed out into the heart of the Bering Sea as we go into your Saturday afternoon. For the west coast, southerlies around 10 to 15 knots, a little bit stronger out around St. Matthew with a 20-knot wind. Look for about 4 to 7 foot seas out in the water, and closer to the coastline, 3 to 4 foot seas in most areas. St. Lawrence Island could see up to 5 on Friday. A south and westerly wind is picking up. All the higher winds and seas we saw down around the Aleutians, that's moving north and east now toward the west coast on Saturday. 15 to 25 knots tops. 15 knots coming in from the west for the Kuskokwim Delta. Southerlies for Norton Sound. Same goes for St. Lawrence Island. 7 foot seas there, and about the same for St. Paul and St. George with that southwesterly flow. For the Beaufort, easterlies at 15. Look for 3 foot seas there. An offshore flow for the Chukchi coast, 10 to 20 knots. Expect about 3 to 5 foot seas as we get into Friday. For Saturday, southerlies continue, 20 to 25, 5 to 6 foot seas on Saturday. Easterlies continue for the Beaufort and pick up a little bit more. That's going to help to move some of that ice around as we get into your weekend there, especially as that is melting and loosening up. For tonight, look for showers across the northern coast, especially the Chukchi coast with a trough of low pressure there. That'll keep clouds across the northern third of Alaska. Most areas that are going to be dealing with smoke for the interior and south central. Watch for that to continue and potentially be dense at times, so be careful as you're traveling around. And certainly if you are suffering from a poor air quality, try and find some cleaner place to breathe. Out across the west, areas of light rain, fog, and drizzle will continue as that frontal boundary kind of falls apart and tries to move eastward into a very high area of heat. Near record temperatures are possible across the interior, south central, and southeast. Flood watch continues for the Taya River around the Chilkoot Trail as we go through the weekend. Thanks for watching, and be safe. Have a good weekend.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.